shall not die, but live. These are the words I've been saying to myself the last 3 or 4 days as I've suffered through the pollen of Columbus, Georgia. I still sound a little froggy, so you might not be able to understand me clearly. I told the 8 o'clock crowd this morning I've been taking cold medicine for days, so I take no responsibility for what I'm saying in my sermon today. It might not make any sense, but I'll try to be clear. There's some good stuff in the readings today, good stuff for us to listen to, particularly in the gospel reading. I love the Gospel of John, and this morning's lesson from the Gospel of John is one of the best, in my opinion. John's stories are rich, and they have many different layers to them. We can read it on the surface and get one message out of it, and we can continue to read the scripture over and over again and pray and take it apart and find all kinds of hidden meanings there. All kinds of ways that God continues to speak to us through this gospel reading. All kinds of ways that the gospel writer wanted us to see and understand who Jesus is in this complex story. So let's look at some things about it. The religious leaders thought this man was born blind because he was a sinner, or perhaps because his family had sinned. It was a common thought that if you had an illness like this, it was given to you by God as a punishment. Why on earth would you be born with an ailment like this unless God was punishing you in some way? Jesus quickly and clearly says that this man does not have this illness. He is not blind because of any sin on his part or because of anything his family has done. And Jesus gives a clear answer. He is this way so that the works of God may be revealed. In this situation, in this difficulty, God's power will be revealed to God's people. God will use this circumstance to make believers. And then the story continues to develop a little bit. I want to share a few other things that are interesting about the story. It speaks to the people there, to the religious authorities, and the disciples are learning about who Jesus is, but it also speaks to you and to me. The first interesting thing I find as I start to unpack this scripture is that the religious leaders walk past this blind man every day of their life. This is a person they walk past every day of their life. And now the man is healed, and they don't know him. They are unsure of who he is. The truth is, they have never really seen this man before. They have never noticed him. They have walked past him over and over and over again. And now that he has received this gift from God, they wonder who he is. They don't recognize him. What does that say to you and to me? How many times have we not seen someone in our lives, in our daily routine, that perhaps God has placed there for a reason, and we walk by day after day after day, not seeing? Or how many times have we not seen something going on in the life of perhaps someone we love? We've not noticed something that God has placed there for us to see, and we cannot see it. This gospel story is for us to help us open our eyes. The next thing we notice in this gospel story is that after the man receives healing, the religious leaders don't believe he has actually been healed, or don't believe that he's received a miracle, or don't believe that Jesus is the one who had the power to heal him. They don't believe it. They refuse to see the power of God at work in this man's life. It can speak to you and I also, you and me also. How many times have we refused to see or notice God at work in someone else's life? Whose religious leaders didn't accept it because this is not in their territory. This is not the way they understand God working. We are blind at times to God's power at work in the lives of people we know and in the world because it looks different from our experience. We haven't been in that place. God hasn't touched us in that way. God has not spoken to us in that way. And we are blind to the power of God working in the world. Perhaps God is doing something in our lives and we haven't seen it yet. Another interesting thing about this gospel story is that the man receives his sight, and then Jesus, from that point on, calls him into a life of faith. Jesus calls him into a life of faith. Jesus grants him sight, and then Jesus helps him really see. He receives his sight, and he first says of the man who helped him, the man they call Jesus put mud on my eyes and gave me sight. The man they call Jesus healed me. And then later in the story, he says, the prophet healed me. And then at the end of the story, the man who's received his sight calls Jesus Lord and worships him. Receives his sight, and he is called into faith by Jesus. I once was lost, but now am found. Was blind, but now I see. Does that sound familiar to you? I once was lost, but now am found. Was blind, but now I see. It's a popular hymn. We've sung it many times, most of us. Amazing Grace. I want to tell you a few things about Amazing Grace and the man who wrote that hymn. John Newton wrote that hymn. He was an Anglican clergyman in the 18th century. He was born in 1724. And he was a poet. He was a gifted man. But there's much more to learn about his story than you might be aware of. John Newton was born in England in 1724, as I mentioned, but not particularly to a religious family. His parents were Christians, but they were not regular church-going people. He did not grow up going to church every Sunday to hear the Word of God preached. He did not have any particular religious connection or denomination or affiliation in any kind of way. John's father was a sea merchant, gone quite a bit on long journeys on the sea. John's mother died when he was 6 years old. Biographers tell us that John Newton was largely raised by a stepmother in his early years who was shut off to him emotionally, who did not nurture him and care for him as most mothers would care for their child. The father gone, a mother raising him who was not his own child, her own child, and emotionally closed off. At age 11, John went to join his father at sea to work with his father. Now you can imagine the kind of company he might have been in as an 11-year-old boy with a bunch of men out at sea. John learned a lot of rough things about life. He had lots of doubts about the existence of God. He had doubts about why these things had happened to him in his life, why his mother died, why he had these hardships, why he now had to be doing the work of a man at age 11 on a boat. Lots of questions of God, and yet he wanted to believe. John grew up to make some bad choices in his life, to make some poor decisions. He was drafted into the military service, and as an adult, he experienced something that changed his life forever. When he was 24 years old, he was out at sea, and there was a great storm at sea, and the storm was battering the boat that he was in, the ship that he was in, and many of the men on the ship were tossed overboard. And John prayed as fervently as he could for God to save him. And God did save him. He did not drown. He did not die. For 2 more weeks he stayed on that battered ship with no food, finally landed on the coast of Ireland. John knew that God had done something for him, that God was going to use him in some way, yet he did not understand how that would happen. He still had this rough nature about him. He still had this difficult life. He still had lots of questions about God. He continued in the slave trade for years after this thing happened to him, after God had spared his life. 10 years after this incident, John was ordained, became a clergyman, felt God calling him in that direction. John was assigned to a small village where there were 2,400 people living there. A very small job, not the cushy job of the church, but the job that was hard to handle. And John's people loved him as a clergyman. He knew how to talk like a sailor. He knew all the rough ways of life. He spoke clearly and plainly out of his own life and his own life experiences and his own convictions. He still wrestled with difficult things. He still wrestled to understand what God was doing in his own life. The thing I want to say about John Newton was that the words of this hymn that are so precious to us came to him 24 years after God had saved his life. 24 years later, these words came to him. I once was lost, but now am found. Was blind, but now I see. Sight, the spiritual kind of sight we're talking about, doesn't come to us automatically. We don't wake up one day and see and understand the mysteries of life clearly. We don't wake up one day and have a sure sense of what our life is all about, our purpose in life, why God has saved us or sent us in certain directions. We don't know all of those things. Our spiritual sight comes to us gradually, slowly, carefully, throughout all the ways of our lives. Just like the blind man in the gospel, Jesus calls us into faith over and over again throughout our lives. Calls us into trusting. Calls us into believing. Calls us into that kind of life where we see as God sees. See and understand. The same is the case for you and me. What might God be calling us to? Who might God be placing in our path for us to see? What has God placed in our lives that we need to see clearly? What opportunities are we walking past every day that God is inviting us to take notice of? How has God saved us? And what are we doing with our lives? I once was lost, but now am found. Was blind, but now